Hey, we're back live on the Strange Oddities podcast. Guys, welcome to tonight's show. I had a couple of weeks off of the podcast. Life happens, things get in the way. We get bumps in the road, we get obstacles thrown our way. Life happens, but we're back. We're back live tonight here on the Strange Oddities podcast. I've missed you guys. I hope you guys have missed the live podcast every week. So we've been off for 2 weeks. But we're back, and we have a really great guest for tonight and the audience and listeners tonight. I'll introduce him in a little bit. But as always, guys, let's get all that, boring stuff out of the way so we can have the whole rest of the show to have fun with our guests and the interview for the remainder of the show. So, guys, if you haven't subscribed, as you can see on the screen, please subscribe. We're on Facebook Live. We're on YouTube Live. That's where you can watch us live every week. We have multiple shows throughout the week. Sometimes we go once a week. Sometimes we go twice a week. Follow us on Facebook because that's where all the guest information. Follow us. Give us a like on Facebook. Strange Oddities Podcast. That's where all the guest information and announcements and all the great news about the podcast is on the Facebook page. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Instagram, and now Twitter. So I hope to go live on all those streams eventually, but we do archive some shows on iTunes and Spotify. So wherever you get your podcasts, that's where you can get Strange Oddities Podcast. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and give this gentleman a nice warm welcome to our listeners and viewers of Strange Oddities Podcast. As always, guys, the motto of our show, our tagline is exploring the horizons of your mind. Entertainment and beyond. So this fellow is in my world. He has written books, and I'm really impressed with how many books he's written over the years. He's been doing it for some time. He's into UFOs, extraterrestrials. He's into the paranormal. He covers a broad spectrum of the paranormal, not just ghosts and stuff. He does a lot of research. He's a former software engineer, and his name is Martin Ettington. Hopefully, I pronounced his last name correctly. I don't want to botch anybody's names, but this has been in the works. It's been in the making for about a month or so. I'm going to share his website with everybody real quick. It's mkeddingtonbooks.com, and you can get his information there, guys. So I want to go ahead and get this nice gentleman in here so we could start the show. Martin, I want to thank you again publicly in front of our viewers and listeners. There's evidence of me thanking you for being a guest on tonight's podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate you having me on your show, and I'm looking forward to talking with you. By the way, I really like your opening. I didn't realize you had such a nice opening to the show.
I've had lots of practice. I've been podcasting for a long time, and I figure with all those years of experience, I better get it right and give my guests a nice welcome.
Thank you. And my website, just to repeat, is mkeddingtonbooks.com, spelled mkeddingtonbooks.com. And I have 130 plus books in like 12 different categories of strange things, as you know, since you've seen it.
Yeah, exactly. Which I thought, Mr. Ettington would be a great fit for the show. And of course, he does. So we're going to get into a lot of cool topics that he writes about, of course. If anybody has questions throughout the show, we do have a chat, live chat during the show, guys, real quick. If you have a question, we'll try to relay them to our guests. So if you are, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube, we'll see them either way. Just in advance notice to our viewers and listeners, and my apologies to my guest, as he saw before we went live. The internet's a little bit wishy-washy tonight. If we lose you guys, I promise we will get back on. Hopefully we don't. I will pray to the internet gods that my internet stays on for the rest of the show. All right. So, Martin, where do we even start? How about tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got started, what drove you to be the author and guy behind.
That sounds good. I think I'll start when I was 11 years old, and I read a book called Stranger Than Science by Frank Edwards. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It was like about 1960, that book.
Wow.
And it was all about strange things. It was about disappearing people and psychics and all sorts of things. And I started to wonder, what is really real? And then I started reading a lot of science fiction, first comic books, which transitioned to science fiction. So by my teens and later, I was starting to get very interested in spiritual and paranormal things. And then I went to college at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, studying engineering. And that was 73 through 77. And on the side, I had a guy I met who became my mentor. His name was Sam Lentine. He was working on his PhD in physics. He already had a master's, and he was a blind psychic.
Oh, wow.
So he had a meditation course, which I helped him out with to organize it. And he taught me meditation, and he taught me how to open my crown chakra and take energy in through my head. And of course, this is all theoretical until you experience it, and then it starts to get psychologically destabilizing. So as a result of that, while I was studying engineering, I was reading a lot of books about spirituality. I'd been raised as a Christian, but I started reading a lot more about Eastern religions and spirituality in general, and things like books on theosophy. And so I became very interested in having a lot of experiences with the paranormal, as well as becoming an engineer. So then I graduated in 77 with a degree in engineering science. And I went to work for big companies like GE, HP, and later on Boeing and Northrop Grumman. There's some companies in between. Yeah, so I had a regular career in the technical area.
Yeah, those are some big companies to work for too.
Yeah. And then I decided later on that I'd accumulated a lot of knowledge over the decades that I wanted to share with people. And I wrote one book in 2000, which was about using the scientific method to study the paranormal. But I didn't do much with it, and I didn't really market it because I was still busy working and supporting my family. So about 2008 was a big transition for me because my ex divorced me, which turned out to be a good thing in the long run. And I also, around 2011, had my last gig because I was getting in my 50s, so a lot of people didn't want me working there. So I started writing full time. So I'd say about 2008, I started writing full time. And I started by writing a book on physical immortality and longevity. And then I wrote another one on the paranormal called Godlike Powers and Abilities. And I just kept going. And as I kept going, I started writing books about my experiences and about things I researched, and it just developed and grew into more and more categories. And we can talk about some of those tonight, and I can talk about some of the main things I learned. And so that's how I've gotten into this. And then, of course, I've been doing more marketing and all sorts of things and appearing on interviews like with your show. And it's something I'm really passionate about because I really like sharing what I've learned and what I've researched. And I try and do it uniquely because I have an analytical point of view being an engineer. So I try and look at all these experiences I've had and things I've researched and look at them in an analytical way. So maybe I have a slightly different perspective than some people who write about this stuff. So I hope that makes my books interesting.
Yeah.
And I only write about things that interest me. I don't write about anything that I don't have an interest in. Right. So I'm always fascinated about the topic as I write about it.
Awesome. And as I tell all my authors on my shows, I admire those and commend those who write at all, because it takes a special person and takes a passionate person to be really into what they're writing about. Because writing a book is tough. For me, it's tough. I've tried writing in the past, and there seems to be a lot of people that just get like books out there, and I just admire and really respect authors that just like people like you who just are throwing books out there that are like, not just books but intellectual books and that shows your intelligence and shows your background and like you said, giving the perspective of being a former software engineer person and giving it a different spin. And I admire those people that can do that. And I think it's very awesome for you to wanting to share that portion of your life experiences with the public, especially in a book, because Sometimes people don't always want to share those things, but I think it's great that you do that.
Well, thank you, Matt. And so I guess maybe here is a good place. I'll start on one of the first main topics I delved into, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
All right. So in 2008, I was looking for a good topic to write on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been reading a variety of newspaper articles of people around the world who claimed to have birthdays. They were 150, 160. I'd seen articles and some videos on people like that. And of course, conventional doctors and insurance companies say, well, nobody can really live to be much over 100. And I think the oldest woman who lived that was documented was a woman in France who lived to be 122.
Wow.
And so I started doing my own research, and I found to my amazement that there were many people who'd lived well over 100, some into their mid 100s, some into their late 100s, some even over 200. Like a good example is a Chinaman named Lai Ching-yang, who was documented in the New York Times in the 1930s as having lived for 256 years, if you can believe that.
I do remember that, yes.
Okay. He was an herbalist for the first 100 years, and that probably helped his longevity. And he had like 23 wives over that time.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So anyway, and he was visited the Emperor of China, in fact, at one point. So anyway, there's a lot of these stories of people who live for a very long time. So then once I established that real long-lived people exist, then the next question to answer is, how is that possible? So I started doing a lot of research, and I wrote my first book on physical immortality. And I followed it up over several years of collecting knowledge and research with something I called the 10 Principles of Personal Longevity. And that became a book as well as an online training program that I have that people can take, which is audiovisual and written. And the idea is to teach people these steps, these 10 steps that they can do to increase their longevity. I think everybody has the ability to improve their longevity. And I won't go into all of it, but some of the steps are like, the first one is that you have to understand that real long-lived people exist. They really do. There are records of them. The second thing is the psychological, that you have to want to live. You have to have a purpose in life. And as you get older and older, especially in your above 50, some people don't have a purpose in life. They just drift. So having a purpose in life is important. And then there's other aspects. I won't get into all of it, but they're spiritual and physical. And I even have a principle at the end about once you've done all the things you can to improve your length of your life, then you can use your intuition. I've had a lot of experiences with premonitions and intuition, and I give people exercises they can do, which will help them avoid accidents. Because once you're very healthy, the biggest danger to your life is what? Accidents. Mm-hmm. And I found that people can use this to help them avoid accidents. So anyway, I spent multiple years on this whole focus, and it generated like 10 or 12 books, and then training books. I probably wrote over 20 related to longevity and immortality and how people can actually lengthen their lives through going through these various steps. Wow. So that was the first topic that I spent a lot of time on.
Yeah. As far as the guy that was, what was his name again? The
Lai Ching-yang.
Okay, I'm not even going to say his name, but I'm probably going to say it terribly. But it sounds like he ate very healthy. Like he didn't have the foods that we had now, and I'm sure that's like probably just a small portion of of experiencing immortality and longevity, which is eating right.
Yes, I found that of all the factors, though, that I saw, that I determined, there was one factor that seemed to have the most effect on longevity. And when I used to lecture about this to different audiences, and when I asked the question, I didn't get many right answers. What would you guess would be the major factor in a person's longevity?
Exercise.
Well, that's important. But the biggest thing I found was that they all had some type of spiritual connection, whether it was an established religion or something personal. they all had a spiritual connection, because in my view, that kind of brings a force of vitality down into your body.
Sure.
So that's just some trivia about that.
Yeah. Almost like cleansing your soul and like cleansing your chakra and all those bad energies that are around you. And then
that's part of it. That's part of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when you have that clarity, then you can delve more into that.
So another topic I got into in parallel with the longevity books, I got into the paranormal, and I started writing about my experiences. So I'll mention one of my premonitional experiences, and then I'll mention a couple, and then I'll talk about the ghost story that we were discussing earlier, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, real quick though, for those who don't know what premonitions are, maybe we can give them a very brief definition of what a premonition is.
Right. Premonitions or prophecies are pretty much the same thing. It's about seeing a path in the future, and the future is really multiple alternatives, multiple options, but seeing a path in the future that may come true. Mm-hmm. Because not all premonitions have come true. And I'll explain some of what I've learned from my experiences and research about this too.
Okay.
So anyway, I think it was about 1976, I had a summer job at General Electric Gas Turbine Engineering in Schenectady. And I was meditating during my lunch hour, because I was a weird college kid. They let me do that. And I was thinking about a trip I was going to take to Cape Cod at the end of the summer in August. So I was visualizing Cape Cod and what I was going to do out there. And all of a sudden I had this incredible vision that I was trying to get up on a surfboard, and I fell off, and bam, the thing hit me, and I got knocked out of my meditation. It was so dramatic. And I thought, oh my God, what was that? Because this was, I should mention also, a couple of years after I'd started doing meditation and spiritual development. And that's when these abilities started to happen to me. So a couple of weeks later, I was out on Cape Cod. I was walking down a beach, and I saw these guys with a bunch of surfboards, and I said, hey, do you know where I can rent a surfboard? And they said, well, we have extra ones. You can do it with us. And I said, thank you. So I spent the morning trying to get up, and I have to tell you, I wasn't very good at it. I was fairly athletic, but I just had a lot of trouble trying to get up on these stupid boards. So later in the afternoon, probably around 2 or 3, I tried again. I managed to get out to the wave, started to get up. I fell off, went under the wave, came up, and the board came in the exact same scene I'd seen in my meditation. Bam! Hit me in the chin, almost knocked me out. I was all bloody. These guys took me to the hospital. I had 10 stitches and 2 sutures on my chin.
Wow.
And so it was the exact same thing I'd seen in my meditation. This was a real jolt to me. So over the years, I had numerous other things happen to me, some of which saved my life. And I'll relate the most dramatic about a premonition. And then I'll explain how these things work, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm living here in Los Angeles, and I was married. It was 1998. And I was in the summer, and I was waiting for a new contract with Boeing. My wife at the time took my stepdaughter and my son to Spain, to Barcelona, to visit her mother. And I was going to come like a week or so later because I was waiting to see if this contract would start. And then I had the headhunter call me and say, well, look, Martin, you might as well go ahead and go on your trip, because this isn't going to happen for a couple of weeks. So it's late August. I decide I'm going to go on September 3rd. And I get ready to call the travel agent, because I was still using travel agents then. And I get this really dark black feeling. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? I should also mention at the time that I'd had a feeling for a couple of years at the time that I wasn't going to live very long. I just had this feeling. Okay.
Wow.
So I tried a second time that day, and I couldn't. I got a very dark black feeling. And because of my previous experience with different premonitions, I figured I better pay attention to it. So I think it was the next morning, I decided to try and call again. I got my hand to the phone, and another dark black feeling of death. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? So I went and lay down and started meditating and thought about the future. And I thought, if I get on this, there's going to be a big plane crash on September 3rd. So I was really fighting myself, because the momentum was that I really wanted to go be with my family, right?
Right.
And I thought, this is really stupid. And if I hadn't had those previous experiences with premonitions happening to me, I would have ignored it. But because I had that experience, I decided, okay, this may be stupid, but I'm going to listen to it, and I'm just not going to go. And as soon as I thought that and made that decision, then all my fears of the future went away. So I called my wife and told her, and she didn't really care. She was having a good time there. So I'm really sick of this. I feel stupid. I'm at home. The only thing I've got with me is the dog. And so come September 3rd, 1998, a flight I would likely have been on, I will never know for sure, but it's a flight I would likely have been on, a Swiss Air flight, crashes into the ocean off Newfoundland, Canada, and kills a couple hundred people.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there are movies about people avoiding plane crashes. Well, This is a real one that happened, a dramatic thing that happened to me.
Wow.
So as a result of that, here's my thought about how premonitions work, how prophecies work, and what they mean. So first, I believe we all have a spirit connected to us, and it's the core of our being. And it's part of a universal consciousness. That may not be exactly the same Christian belief. It's similar, but I believe we all have an eternal spirit. And I believe this spirit lives outside of time and space. So it can see things in the future. It can see probable events happening. And that's what a premonition is. A premonition is when you relax your mind and slow down your thoughts. Because imagine a goldfish bowl. A goldfish bowl is like the dirt is swirling and you can't see much. But if you go into a meditative state, you slow down, all the dirt and everything swirling, and you can see the light bulb. The light bulb shines out of the goldfish bowl. So I believe that we have probable paths that we're going on. It's like we're in a river. We're going down the river, and we can navigate from side to side in the river. Those are the probable choices we have.
Right.
And what was really interesting to me about this whole experience when I examined it was I really wanted to go. I had a momentum in me towards going and having this horrible crash happen to me. I had to fight that momentum through force of will and my logic and my experiences. I fought that momentum, and that's how I avoided the plane flight. Right. So what I'm saying is probabilities of the future are something you can see, but it won't necessarily happen to you if you can learn how to avoid it or find a way to avoid it.
Right.
And I'll mention one more. Go ahead. Question?
No, I have something to add to that particular experience you had. Maybe not so much the same, but kind of like in the terms of deja vu, even though it's like not a premonition, but the feeling of that you've done it before. I've had that feeling like I don't know how many times, and I'm like, I remember this. I for some reason remember doing these things before, and I'm just saying I'm kind of glad that you've mentioned, the experience you had and the reason for those premonitions, because I wonder if it has anything to do with those things as well.
It might, or it might be previous lives. I don't know.
Right.
All I know is that the more I've experienced, the more I've learned, the more I've realized how many unknowns there are in our world.
Yeah.
So I'll mention one more thing about probability and how sometimes it can be very difficult or almost impossible to change.
Yeah.
In 1975, I was living in the New York, New Jersey area. And at that point, they were also building the World Trade Center. And I went downtown one day in the path tubes, and I decided to go up in the tower as far as I could because they were still building it. And I got up to about the 50th floor of one of the towers, and I had a great view. I mean, it was an open floor. There was nobody in there. So I wanted to see how good my intuition was. So I put my hand on the concrete column, and I just closed my eyes, and I thought, how long will this building last? I think it was 1976. And I expected a couple hundred years. And it came back to me 25 years. And I thought, that doesn't make any sense. A building like this should last for hundreds of years.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, of course, we know what happened. And I think sometimes there are events that so many people are focusing on this event happening and nobody can change it really because it's almost foreordained. And those are big events, world shaking events, which we can't change individually because so many people's consciousness is involved.
Right. It almost makes you feel like, in a way, like these big events, these traumatic events that catastrophic, globally catastrophic, like 9/11, is almost like written fate, like it was designed, like it was gonna happen no matter what.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so anyway,
what I feel like. Yeah.
So this is part of the paranormal events I had. Anyway, now to the ghost experience, if you want to hear that.
Sure.
So when I was in college at RPI, my friend Sam, I should mention there was a woman in the meditation group who said she had a haunted house in Albany. And this was about October of 1975. So my friend Sam wanted us to go examine this house. He said he had a way to clear it because he was a strong clairvoyant, and he wanted us to take some tools. So we took a camera with infrared film. We took a bottle of water, a big plastic bottle of water about, I don't know, 1.5 feet long, maybe 2 feet long. He wanted to draw these entities into it. I know that sounds weird, but he wanted to do that. And he wanted to examine it under nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR, which is now a common diagnostic tool. And so we went to visit this house on a Saturday night. And I was kind of skeptical, but I was driving my car, and I had him and another guy, Mark. And we went to the haunted house, and we're kind of trying to sense cold spots. A lot of things that I thought, well, maybe this is kind of flaky, but it's an interesting evening. So we did this, and he opened the bottle of water at one point, and he said, Marty, can you imagine all these spirits are being drawn into the water that he treated? And I thought, okay, whatever. And so then we left the house. He said it was clear. Fine. So then we went to visit his friend Carolyn, another blind woman who had a dog, and we took the bottle upstairs with us. This is like 1 a.m. And we had some pizza, and the dog was really scared of the bottle. And I don't know. I'm just thinking, whatever. It's Saturday night. At least I'm out of the room. So then we're driving back, probably 2 a.m. on the road to Troy. It's a freeway next to the Hudson River. And I ran out of gas. I didn't have a very good gas meter, and the car slows down as it stops. Okay, that's great. Wonderful. So I flag down a car, and I take a gas can and go to the nearest gas station to get some gas and come back. And I do make it back. And when I get back, Sam and Mark are saying, "Oh, Marty, God, we're so glad you're back. There's rocks flying against the car and all sorts of strange things happening." I said, "Just calm down, guys. Nothing is happening here. Just relax. We've had a strange evening, so let's just relax." And they said something weird was happening. So I got in the car and I put in the gas, and I started driving back to RPI because you have to cross a bridge and go up the hill. And so we're driving back, and I'm feeling this presence because, remember, the bottle's in the back seat with Sam. I'm feeling this presence looking over my shoulder, and I thought, that's really strange. What is this? And there was this presence, and it's stronger and stronger. I thought, this doesn't make any sense. And so we go over the bridge, we're going up the hill, and as we're going up the hill, Mark and Sam start yelling. They're saying, this thing is attacking us. I said, what are you talking about? It's attacking us. And I said, just take it easy, guys. And all of a sudden, I don't know how to explain this, except this thing surrounds my head, and I feel like it's piercing my brain. It was like it was raping my brain. It was the strangest, scariest thing I ever experienced. And I'm driving, and I weave a little bit, and I managed to get the car under control. I still feel the thing attacking me. It was raining slightly. So I pull over to a grating, and I get out of the car, and I grab the bottle of water. I drain it down the grating, and I kick the bottle in. So the thing's no longer attacking me. And I thought, oh my God, what the hell is this?
Right.
I mean, this was the scariest experience of my life.
Wow.
And it still is.
Yeah.
And even counting fighting a bear on the Appalachian Trail many years later, this is the number one experience. So then we went back to Sam's place, and we called a priest and had him say a prayer for us. And I couldn't go to sleep. None of us could go to sleep. And it's like 7 a.m.
I don't blame you.
And finally I go home. And I should say for weeks, I felt like there was some type of entity that wanted to attack me out there. For weeks, I was having nightmares.
You think it was still following you?
I don't know. I ended up having kind of dream fights with something that finally went away. But nothing like this ever happened in my life before or after. And this was another thing that I think spurred my interest in finding out what the hell this is all about.
Yeah.
About the spiritual sides and the paranormal sides. And I've since read a lot about it and heard other people's experiences and wrote some books as a result. So I've had some really strange experiences, and you have to figure out a context to put them in. And I didn't want to just ignore things and say they were impossible. I wanted to figure out a framework that these things fit within. And so that's been a big part of my life, to explore what that framework is.
Right. Do you think the experience with the bottle and the horrific experience you had around your head, did you feel it was negative, or,
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was a really pissed off entity or group of entities that were caught in the bottle that didn't want to be there.
Yeah, it was almost like they released the genie out of the bottle, and then
they really didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And that's why they were attacking.
Wow.
So anyway, that's the story. So between the premonitions and this experience and some other experiences, it really said to me, I've either got to ignore a lot of these things or learn as much as I can to try and fit these things in a proper framework.
Right.
So that's a lot of the paranormal stuff.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people, and I say this a lot, quite a bit actually. I tell people, always go with your gut. Always go with your feeling, because that will never steer you in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
Always listen to your intuition, because that's your intuition and it's trying to tell you something.
Yeah, so, intuition is very important and people shouldn't ignore it.
Yeah.
I always tell people that too, that intuition is extremely important.
Yeah, especially if you feel something bad is going to happen to you, or, just something that could be dangerous, or something that could affect your life tremendously, like, with what happened to you. And and I'm sure a lot of people have had similar experiences, but I say always listen to your inner voice. Always listen to that.
Right. So, hold on, I'm trying to find the video here. I've lost the video. What did I do?
Oh,
there we go. I'm back.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Well, just real quick, Martin, if you don't mind, we're going to tell our listeners and viewers real quick. I have been having internet issues for a little bit before the show. Knock on wood, so far it's been good. We've been okay. So if for some reason we disappear, we'll be back. I promise you. Sometimes the internet isn't always perfect. So that's technology for you. Martin knows all that because he was a software engineer expert. So I have to ask you, what was it like working for those like major companies? Because you had Boeing, you had Grumman, you had these are huge companies.
Right.
What was your you don't have to get to every detail of what you did, but what was it like working for those people?
Well, each company I found has its own culture, and they're all different.
Yeah.
And some of them, because a lot of the time I was there as a contractor, like at Boeing and Northrop Grumman, and some treats their contractors well and some don't.
Yeah.
So, but I used to earn a lot more money as a contractor. I would earn like double what the employees were, which is why I wanted to stay a contractor. And I enjoyed it. Like I was working on a national missile defense project at Boeing in the early 2000s. And I was a software manager and had a team of people working for me. And one of the things I found is that even when you're working with technical people, some of these people are real artists.
Yeah.
The software engineers I had were all highly paid software engineers, and they worked in a way that I would call real artistry. Even though they were doing something technical, writing code, they were very creative in what they built, very, very creative. So I think creativity comes in a lot of ways in what people do.
Yeah,
It's very
absolutely.
important.
There was a friend of mine. I don't remember exactly who this was that mentioned this. He made a statement saying he kind of finds it interesting that the majority of people who are believers of the paranormal, or paranormal enthusiasts, or those who are researchers or investigators, at one point in time, they're creative, and they have they have these skills and talents that people in the paranormal community and field that they have. And he finds that, maybe the people in the field are using most of the, that creative side. And I kind of lean towards that. I agree with, you know
I think there's something to that. I'm one
yeah,
of those people that believes that intelligence, as it's measured by intelligence tests, only measures a very narrow focus of
right,
who we are.
yeah,
I think if you look at the content of our spirit and how that interacts with our brain, that's 90 plus percent
yeah,
of who we are.
right,
And the things we learn from creativity, from intuition, all
yeah,
those things, those aren't just chemical messages in our brain. They are
yeah,
from the spiritual part of our being,
right. And
which is, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say that I think, like, because of how we were raised, with our families, our religions, or whatever we do for careers, we're always focused on all those, like, everyday, life situations, and people don't realize what they could really tap into as far as those creative ideas, or their skill they have, or their talents they have. I think there's a lot of people that probably aren't even aware they have talents.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I think our society doesn't necessarily help people express that. People have to make an effort to join a religion or join some spiritual group to develop themselves. I've
Yeah.
had some interesting spiritual enlightenment experiences, and I wrote some books about that too.
Cool.
And those are things that you can do through focusing, focus meditation, and other things to help clear yourself. I believe that we can all spiritually evolve. I
Yeah.
think that we can all have spiritual experiences, and I don't believe enlightenment is just one thing. I think there can be multiple enlightenments a person has,
Okay.
and I've written about that too.
Yeah. What
So,
What are some of the multiple layers that you think?
well, I think the first kind of enlightenment I had, and this had to do with opening chakras. You know what chakras are,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
and that was in college when I learned to open my crown chakra to take in energy, because that was a real physical thing to take in energy and do healing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But probably the most powerful experience I had was what I call a heart opening experience, opening my heart chakra,
Mm.
which I did with a woman who was a what do you call an Indian? There's a word I'm looking for.
Shot.
Shaman,
Shaman.
a
Shaman.
shaman who led me through a meditation after I'd gone through a lot of things in preparation. And I had this incredible experience. This must have been, I don't know, 2010 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I should mention that previously I was like a lot of men and women who I felt like I had a hole in myself that I needed somebody else to fill it. And that was a big part of the reason I got married and probably later got divorced. And that we think that marrying somebody is going to fill that hole in our being.
Right.
So anyway, this thing opened me up, and it was an incredible experience. I felt like I was connecting to everything around me and everyone. And all this energy started coming into me through my heart.
Mm.
And it was very dramatic. I don't know how to explain it. It was like a high that lasted for weeks.
Mm.
And it changed the way I interacted with people too. So where if I'd go to a store and do something that I had done before, like order a coffee, people wanted to talk to me. People wanted to relate to me. And I found out that this changed my life on a whole different level. And since then, even though I'm divorced, I haven't really been interested in relationships for the sake of a relationship, because I don't feel a need for one. It's more a matter of, is it something that, will make 1 and 1 equal 3?
Right.
But I believe strongly in spiritual experiences and spiritual enlightenment. And having experienced that, I see how powerful that can be in our lives. So I recommend everybody to strive for that. And Christians can have enlightenment experiences too. They may not call it that, but everybody can have these experiences. It's not just a few gifted people that can do this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that 100%. I myself, I don't come out in the public very often about my own abilities, but I'm also a psychic medium. I've had quite a bit of experience with my abilities, and I've never really tuned into them until just recently in my life. And I found the reason I bring this up because it can relate to what you were saying, because I think by finding these abilities in myself that it filled that void. I mean, I'm married and I'm happy with my wife and everything, but for years, yeah, you were always looking for that, like, to fill that empty space or that void with your inner self. And I think for me personally, like when I found those abilities, it filled that other space, that other, emptiness that I had spiritually, and it got me more connected to my inner my spirituality for me. So, like, I've been more spiritual than I've ever been in my life because of those abilities, and I've tapped into it more because of that. And I've become more spiritual these days and more open to that, perspective of the paranormal. More so because of.
I think that's really cool, Matt.
Yeah.
And I can feel it from you. I can feel your spiritual aura, if you will.
Yeah. So
it's really cool.
Yeah, and for me, like, I don't do it for like the money. Like some psychic mediums, they do readings and they collect money, from people.
Right.
I do it because I feel I have I like helping people, and if I get a message from a spirit or some entity that wants to communicate with me, and I have a message for somebody, I'll let it communicate with me and I'll relay the message to them. And I feel like, because you have that special connection with that person, so therefore you're able to communicate with their spirit that's trying to communicate with them through you that have the ability. And that's why I feel like I finally found that missing void, because, like, for me, that's rewarding,
That's neat. That's really neat. We'll have to talk more about that offline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Let me get into a new subject, if I might.
Yeah, sure. Go
ahead. Time travel and dimensional shifting.
Right up my alley.
Okay. Well, this is something, having taken relativistic physics in college, that I thought really was kind of impossible. But trying to be open-minded, I did some research on stories of time travel.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sir Victor Goddard, who flew a plane in Scotland into the future, saw an aerodrome. I won't go into the whole story, but he saw an aerodrome. And then he came back, and then like 12 years later, he saw that it was the same aerodrome there in that spot. Or there's a city in England that has a lot of people who have gone back in time to like the 1950s to see stores there, and they came back and found out it wasn't there anymore. It's Bull Street in, is it Liverpool? I'm trying to remember the city. Anyway, I did all this research, and one of my principles about validating something, because it's not by a detailed scientific method, it's more about, are things consistent? Do they make sense? When I find a lot of reports about a particular topic that are all very consistent, that says to me there's something real there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a whole book on time travel, real, time travel stories, that I found these stories. I found these stories of people who had gone through and had verified experiences. And it led me to think that, there must be some type of time warp or time portal that people can go through to see time and go to different places or observe different times and come back.
Right.
So it makes me think that our universe is not as stable as physicists think. It's much more malleable.
Yeah.
And a similar thing on dimensions. I did not used to believe in dimensions. There's a
Mhm.
whole theory that scientists have called the multiverse,
Right.
that we live in a universe of infinite dimensions
Right.
and parallel existences, where if you make a decision A versus decision B, that splits into different dimensions. So this is a subject I researched too. And I found to my amazement all these stories of people who've had dimensional shift experiences. And I thought, oh my God,
Hmm.
this is opening this whole thing up to me. I can't condemn this as fantasy anymore because people have really reported experiencing this. And it's as simple as somebody like some girls who are driving out in the desert and they're on a dirt road, and then it changes to a normal road, and they see it. They enter a town with a lot of alien-looking people in it, and they turn around in a hurry and get out of there, and they're back to normal. There's a lot of strange stories about this. So all the stories I found led me to conclude that there really were parallel dimensions. Now, there's other impacts of this, which is really fascinating, because I did books on other subjects, like one category I call legendary animals, about Bigfoots or dragons or other things. And I want to say, Bigfoot has been seen thousands of times in North America. Yet we don't know where Bigfoot lives. So how can so many people have these experiences, but they can't find where Bigfoot is living? Or thunderbirds, which is ancient giant birds that the Indians knew about. People cite thunderbirds all the time, but we don't have any records or bones of thunderbirds.
Mm.
And so then I was doing a book. This is how you can kind of piece things together. I was doing a book about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which I find is the basis of paranormal abilities, talking about how there's side effects of spiritual development. And I ran across a sutra that I hadn't noticed before, which said, you can discern different realities. And I thought, oh my God, maybe there is a spiritual ability that we can acquire where we can discern reality A versus reality B.
Mm.
So the thought has come to me that after researching all these things, that some of these animals may have the ability to transfer between dimensions. They may live in another dimension and then come here. And in fact, there is a group of people, the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, who were the forerunners of the dwarves and leprechauns, and also the an ancient religious people. I'm trying to remember their names. Anyway,
Yeah.
who said they came from the other world. There was another dimension.
Wow.
So all of these things have been integrated into our culture. And unless you start thinking outside the box about some of these possibilities, then you would say it's impossible. But if you accept the idea that there are alternative dimensions that people and animals can transition to and from, and the idea that there are time warps, then that really changes our whole view of reality.
Yeah, it does.
And we don't have any scientific evidence for this, but I go by the stories of people who seem to be credible. I look for consistency. If I find a lot of consistent stories, then I think there must be something to this. And then I put it together with other pieces of what I've learned, and I start drawing some amazing conclusions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Bigfoot thing, because that is one of the theories. There's a few people with Bigfoot research that claim that they could be interdimensional beings, and that
I'm not surprised. I'm not the first person to think of it, but
yeah,
it makes all sorts of sense to me now.
right. So there's that out there, and maybe that's the reason there's no skeletal remains of any Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence other than potential footprints, which could be easily faked or hoaxed. But then you have hair samples that people keep finding that are inconclusive when they extract DNA from the hair sample, and nothing comes up on radar as to what the hair sample really is. They can't find it in any kind of DNA records.
Mm-hmm.
So everything comes inconclusive.
Yeah.
But it's I love that theory, because I always say maybe like with what we do as paranormal investigators and researchers, maybe we're not always communicating with spirit and ghosts. Maybe we're communicating with interdimensional beings that are coming in and out. And that's why things are so random when it comes to, like, for example, EVPs, electronic voice
Mhm.
phenomena, that we get random words. And why is it we only get, random few words? And it's frustrating as an investigator that we only get random few words, but maybe those random few words is because they're beaming in and out of these parallel, doorways
Yeah.
and portals that they're fading in and out of, and what people call the veil.
Yeah, I have to agree, because I would have talked to me 10 years ago, I would have said this is pseudoscience. It doesn't make any sense.
Right,
But
right,
after all the experiences I've had and the research I've done, I have to conclude that what you're saying is probably true, that our universe is malleable. It's not, and I have a book on that. And that things are not as fixed as we think there are. There are time portals, there are dimensional transitions, there is the astral plane. There
yeah,
are a lot of different spaces around us that we're not normally aware of, and that are the cause or what's behind a lot of the sightings we have or things that happen to us.
yeah,
So, yeah. One
yeah,
more subject I'd like to cover if we have time.
yeah, absolutely. We have, wow, I can't believe we're almost at 9 o'clock. Yeah, I want to make sure you leave space and room at the end of the show, after this one story you have, uh, for plugging your events, your promotion, you
Okay.
know, your books and whatever stuff. So I just want to
Thank you.
make sure we leave enough time for that.
Okay.
All right, go
So
ahead. Shoot.
I did a number of books on ancient history. I'm very interested in ancient history and giants and on the earth and things like that. And then I ran into a topic called out of place artifacts, OOPAs. Have you run into that term?
Yeah, yeah, yep,
So I started collecting information on out of place objects. And I wrote one book about it, and I wrote a second book about it. And then I decided to write, in the last few months, something I call the Encyclopedia of OOPAs,
nice,
Encyclopedia of Out of Place Artifacts. And I found 54 artifacts.
yeah,
And these are the idea of these things are artifacts that may be technological, but from millions of years ago, which are impossible because mankind did not exist.
right,
Typical is like a bowl found in a coal seam, and it's a real bowl. So how the heck did it get there? And this led me to a lot of thinking about whether our earlier predecessors might have come from aliens on the earth millions of years ago. But I ran into one really interesting pattern among all this, and that is in the time frame about 300 million years ago, 300 million years ago, before the dinosaur age, certainly before man existed, there's a number of artifacts that have been found of that age. I
wow,
found like 12 different artifacts from around the world of that age, which makes me think, and one of them is a face mask, by the way, of what
mm,
looks like a face that's very broad featured, doesn't look like a modern person.
mm,
There must have been some type of, I won't say must have been, there likely was some type of civilization 300 million years back in time.
right,
And we know that all of the technology and things we've built now would disappear in, say, 100,000 years. But these are artifacts that came from coal seams or limestone seams. And they say to me, when you look at the pattern, because I go to look for patterns, something existed back then. Some
yeah,
type of worldwide civilization existed very far back in time.
yeah,
So these are some of the conclusions I come to from my research, that there's a lot of patterns that people ignore or they're afraid to
right,
talk about. And this is one of them.
yeah.
It's just, go ahead.
No, I was gonna add to what you're saying. You made an appearance on the hit show on History Channel, Ancient Aliens,
Right.
which you haven't been put out there yet, but hopefully you will. Hopefully they'll play your interview. But on that show, what I find interesting is that I'm not sure what part of the world they brought this up, but there's a pyramid, or one of the many pyramids around the world, that have hieroglyphs of people interacting with dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, there was a time where dinosaurs mixed with human beings. You
Or
know,
our predecessors, either, I think it was giants who lived on the earth then. I've got a whole book about giants.
Yeah.
And they may have come from aliens. I don't know. But some being that walked on 2 feet interacted with dinosaurs.
Yeah. Well, at referring to the giant thing, but there is a theory on that, because there's a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but in Massachusetts, there's a researcher who came across giant skeletons, and I remember there being a docu-series on TV about it. They had put it out for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it got botched. It got taken off the air. But I find it interesting, like, these guys were like about to make like a breakthrough, discovery,
Right.
with their research and archaeological finds somewhere up in Massachusetts with giant skeletons, and then all of a sudden it's taken off the air, and it's like, what are you hiding that you had to take it off the air? Was it canceled, or were they hiding something?
I don't know, but I think a lot of people construct a box around themselves mentally, and they say
Right.
certain things are possible and feasible, and other things are out of the box and ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an out of the box type of guy.
Yeah, me too.
I'm interested in all these things that are out of the box that everybody else says is impossible.
Yeah.
And what I've found out in my 66 years is that many of these things are possible and they've happened. And people just don't want to say anything about it because they're afraid they'll be ridiculed, or there's not a scientific way to prove it yet.
Right.
In fact, if you look at the scientific method, there's a lot of things we may never be able to prove because we need instruments to measure them. And if we don't have instruments, we can't. So what's one of the best instruments out there that we can use? The human mind and spirit. But it has to be adapted to be able to measure things and show that they really exist. And that's something I think we're evolving towards, using people as instruments to measure our universe.
Nice. Yeah. Well said. We're at the bottom of the show. I want to make sure you leave enough room and time for plugging your books, what you're working on, any events coming up. Where can people follow you? And once again, share your web address.
Thank you. So my website again is mkettingtonbooks.com, spelled mkettingtonbooks.com. And I've got like 16 different categories of things on my website. Again, over 100 books. So I won't mention just one book. I'll mention a couple.
Yeah, mention it too.
Ancient history, I've got that one we just talked about. The Encyclopedia of Out-of-Place Artifacts. Under longevity and immortality, I've got a book on the 10 principles of personal longevity. I've got a number on the page, and I just put out a guide to longevity foods, diets, and supplements. Under time and dimensional books, I've got some books. One's titled Real Time Travel Stories from a Psychic Engineer, and another Stories of Parallel Dimensions. Aliens and UFOs, I've got 6 books there. One of them is called 4 Evidences for Aliens and UFOs in Earth's History. Another is about an interesting recent topic, unidentified submerged objects in underwater bases. I've had a lot of people interested in that book.
Nice.
And then under paranormal, I've got my autobiography, as well as books like Paranormal Abilities and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Prophecy, a History and How-To Guide, Use Intuition and Prophecy to Improve Your Life by an Adept. So if people go to my website, there's a page that I have on each book. It goes into a description about it, the table of contents. Some of the pages have more, but I try and provide a lot of information. And then at the bottom, I provide links as to where you can purchase it on Amazon, whether it's an ebook or paperback or audiobook, and different places you can purchase things. And I'm getting a lot more interest on it. I've got a YouTube channel where I put up a lot of the information. I've got some other social media too. And I really appreciate, Matt, you giving me the opportunity to talk. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think it's a cool website. I've spent a lot of time on it. And it's just fun to navigate through and see the different topics that are on there.
Yeah.
And I also sell PDFs. If people want to buy a PDF on my site, they can do that too. Cool. So that's what I do. I'm the kind of the out of the box guy, and I focus on it. You know what's really interesting? One more thing, if I could say, is I thought when I started getting into this that more people would call me crazy. that they would call me nuts. But nobody gives me that type of feedback. They must think I'm writing something intelligent because they seem to accept a lot of what I say,
Right.
and they don't think I'm an out of the box nutcase, which is fine. I don't think I am either. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I'm all about. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Matt.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Uh, I had a blast with this interview. I can't say that I didn't have fun because I thought it was a great conversation.
Cool.
We hit a little bit about everything, which is right up my alley. I can go like 5 hours talking about all those theories and ideas, and
Well,
but
if you ever want me back, I'd love to come.
yeah, absolutely, we could do a definitely, absolutely, 100% do a part two interview because there's so much we could still cover.
Okay.
But stay with me a little bit. Before I close out the show with my audience, if you don't mind, Martin, I'll minimize you and we'll say our goodbyes privately if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
All right, good.
Thanks so much, and thanks to the audience for listening.
All right, awesome. And I hope everybody enjoyed Mr. Martin Ettington, our guest tonight. Again, I'm just going to mention his website address. It's mkettingtonbooks.com. It's MKETTINGTON books.com. That's his website. Very, very, very intelligent person. He was in software engineering, a software engineer. He worked for Boeing, he worked for Grumman. So his books are really interesting because he puts kind of a scientific, spin on his writings and his books. So I recommend that you pick up a few of his books, just to our viewers and listeners. So thank you, Debbie. I want to give a big shout out to Miss Debbie Lavelle. She's our co-producer of Strange Oddities podcast, helps me get guests and information for our guests every now and then. Ryan Speakman was in the chat. I want to say hello, Ryan. Yeah, you can catch the show anytime, guys. So whenever you miss it, it'll always be up on YouTube. It'll always be on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook. That's where all guest information is located. Guys, I have a big guest announcement for tomorrow night. I have James Earp. If you don't know who James Earp is, I'm going to tell you. So, does the last name Earp sound familiar? Well, I hope so. If you're a Wild West person or a Wild West fan of the days of Billy the Kid, Jesse James, there was the infamous OK Corral shooting with Wyatt Earp, and well, basically, James Earp is a descendant of the lesser known brother of Wyatt Earp, James R. Earp. So we're going to have a descendant of the Earps on the Strange Oddities podcast tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So you guys get Strange Oddities back-to-back nights. How cool is that? So I've been gone for a couple weeks, and now we're back for a couple nights in a row. So that's my gift to you guys. So thanks for tuning in. I'm going to play our video. I have more guests coming up. We're going to put it on the Facebook page as soon as I can. And hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight's show. So any feedback, guys, please leave it on our Facebook page. Really appreciate it. And, leave some, good or bad criticism, up on the Facebook page. I would appreciate that. I wish everybody a good night. Be well. Stay safe out there and take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. All right.